Chu Huai kept a mistress behind my back. The girl was only 16, full of pride, vowing to be his one and only for life. He found it quite novel, pressing the beauty against the vermilion railing, coaxing her softly. Shui Fei Wan is nothing but a canary kept in a cage. How can she compare to someone as vibrant and radiant as you? When I first heard these words, I breathed a sigh of relief. I turned around, dug out a red-tasseled spear from the bottom of my trunk, and used its tip to shred the wedding canopy I'd slept under for 3 years. Chu Huai must have forgotten that if it weren't for him, I was originally meant to be an eagle soaring freely over the northern desert. The first time Chu Huai's little girl smashed the jade hairpin I had selected, I knew she did it on purpose. She carried a faint exotic fragrance on her. It was one I had personally blended for Chu Huai, unique in all the world. For this reason, I deliberately looked at her a few more times. She seemed somewhat pleased with herself, brushing the hair by her temples to reveal the most beautiful curve of her profile. Please don't be angry, elder sister. I didn't do it on purpose. This hairpin has such a novel design, it is not quite suitable for someone of elder sister's age. It is better that it broke. Now it won't have to be matched with someone unsuitable. Seeing me frown, she giggled again. But since I broke it with my own hands, naturally I must compensate for it. My gentleman dotes on me, so the household money he gives me is more than I can spend. Shopkeeper, put this broken hairpin on my account. The shopkeeper froze, his eyes suddenly becoming somewhat awkward as he looked at me. I glanced at his account book, which was open to the page for Prince Chi's manor, and the words, Jade Phoenix hairpin, 2,000 taels were clearly recorded there. Me husband Chu Huai is Prince Chi himself, so who else could this girl be, who can openly have purchases recorded under his name? I raised my eyebrows, me gaze turned to the young girl still leaning casually to the side, with both confusion and understanding in my eyes. But she let out a light laugh, looked me up and down several times, her tone full of disdain. No wonder Brother Huai says sister is boring. Women like you from ancient times, all you know is buying jewelry and clothes to dress yourselves up, besides winning over your husband's heart. Is there nothing else you can do? If it were me, I'd get sick of it too. After saying that, as if it still wasn't enough, she circled around me a few times, her eyes regretful. Sister, don't blame others. The one who isn't loved is the third party. Losing to me, you have no reason to complain. I advise you to agree to divorce Brother Huai soon. You are simply not worthy of him. Her words had barely fallen when a crisp smack rang out. A resounding slap landed on her face. She covered her face and looked at me in shock, stammering, You, unable to get the words out. A maid beside me handed over a handkerchief, and I leisurely wiped my hands, glancing at her sideways. Didn't your brother Huai tell you that there is a distinction between high and low? You, a mere outside woman, dare to openly provoke the princess consort of Chi. Even if I beat you to death on the spot, I would be praised for managing the inner courtyard well, wouldn't I? Turning around under her man-eating gaze, I spoke to the shopkeeper again in a calm tone. These 2,000 taels. Let the Prince of Chi bring the banknote himself to repay it. The Prince of Chi's manor doesn't cover expenses for outside women of unknown origin. That night, Chu Huai, who hadn't come to my courtyard in a long time, furiously knocked on my door. The door was kicked open by him, revealing a face filled with suppressed anger. Shui Fei Wan, how dare you? Does this prince even need your permission to take in a woman now? I took a sip of tea, lifted my eyelids to glance at him without much of a reaction. Is your highness referring to that young girl at the treasure pavilion during the day? She publicly humiliated the princess consort of Chi in front of everyone. Isn't that slapping your highness in the face? Shouldn't I have taught her a lesson? Chu Huai must have heard about what happened during the day. He choked for a moment, his tone softening, though still stiff. Miamian is just a pure and passionate young girl. Unlike you, full of schemes and utterly vulgar. When the time comes, I will bring her into the manor as a secondary consort. You'd better not trouble her again, or else I won't hesitate to divorce you on grounds of jealousy and barrenness, and elevate her to principal consort. The flickering glazed lamp cast my suddenly frozen shadow. I suddenly recalled 3 years ago, the day when Chu Huai personally rode to the northern desert to propose marriage. At that time, My red-tasseled spear was hoisting the head of the Northern Dai general. As the blood-stained spear tip brushed past his jade crown, I had asked with a laugh, "Does your highness fear such a crude and barbaric woman as I?" His eyes reflected the solitary smoke of the great desert as he twisted the blood droplets from my armor into rouge and dotted it on my forehead. "What I want is precisely this sharp blade that can cleave through the capital's wind and snow." And now his new blade is being kept as a treasured mistress by him in a separate residence, stained with the blood of my border garrison soldiers. I laughed softly. Back then, the emperor was wary of the Shui family, and the crown prince urgently needed the Shui family's support. Chu Huai, as the crown prince's younger brother, personally traveled north to propose marriage. Me father, left with no choice, agreed to this marriage. From then on, the soaring eagle of the northern desert had its wings brutally broken, caged in this prison forged of golden threads. But now, the person who once vowed to protect me for life has personally pushed me into the abyss. I raised my eyes, my gaze sweeping toward the still indignant Chu Huai. "Your highness once swore before my father that you would never take a concubine in this lifetime. Have you forgotten that?" Chu Huai's eyes flickered, yet he spoke with righteous confidence. "It was merely a joke. How could you take it seriously?" After speaking, he didn't spare me another glance and left with a flick of his sleeves. He didn't even bother to feign a trace of remorse, only thinking his own needs were most important, completely disregarding Shui Feiwan's heartbreak. But he didn't know that this one sentence, this one retreating figure, had also completely shattered Shui Feiwan's last lingering attachment, making her determined to take up her red-tasseled spear again and return to being that self whom no one could restrain. Soon the hidden guards came to report saying Chu Huai had gone straight to the separate courtyard to coax that delicate little girl. Sumiamian still held a grudge over that slap I gave her, keeping a straight face and refusing to acknowledge Chu Huai. And Chu Huai used every trick in the book, finally earning the beauty's smile through tears after promising her to be with you, one life, one world, one pair of lovers. He pressed Sumiamian against the vermilion railing, coaxing her gently in a soft voice. "Shu Feiwan is merely a canary kept in a cage. How can she compare to someone as vibrant and radiant as you?" I nodded and dismissed the hidden guards, then turned and walked to a dust-covered sandalwood box in the corner. Opening the wooden box at the very bottom lay a dark-colored cloth bundle. The surface of the cloth bundle was already covered with a layer of fine dust, yet it still reeked of the unique metallic scent of blood from the northern desert battlefield. He yanked open the wrapping, revealing a section of spearhead gleaming with silver light. I trembled as I reached for that long-lost spear shaft, as if caressing an old friend from years past. The moment my fingertips touched it, the jade bracelet on my wrist suddenly shattered in half. This was what Chu Huai had personally put on me on our wedding night. At that time, the rebellion in the capital had been quelled, and the crown prince ascended the throne as emperor. He lifted my bridal veil and slipped this cold bracelet onto my wrist, his eyes full of affection. "Arwan, noblewoman of the capital, shouldn't touch these weapons anymore." Back then, I actually believed the tenderness in his eyes, letting this pool of jade water lock away my spear, wielding hand. Little did I know he had already prepared an even more exquisite cage. I gripped the spear shaft and swung it around. The dusty red tassel had faded, like the lips of a beauty past her prime. Yet the cold gleam of the spear tip could still pierce through the night. This was a blade my father had forged from the broken armor of fallen soldiers. Once drenched in the blood of chieftains from the 12 tribes of the northern Di, gripped the spear shaft tightly and turned to merge into the night. The gerfalcon in its cage happened to peck through the golden wire cage that confined it at this very moment. Amidst the flying feathers filling the sky, the red-tasseled spear tip lifted the moonlight like silk. Relying on my body's memory, I danced with the spear in the courtyard all night long. Exhilarating. The next day, Chu Huai brought Sumiamian back to the prince's manor with great fanfare. All the servants in the manor cast pitying glances at me. As soon as Sumiamian settled in, she brought several servant women to my courtyard. Though the palm print on her face had faded somewhat, it was still clearly visible. She sat down on the stone bench in my courtyard, as if no one else was around. Her eyes filled with undisguised smugness. You are just relying on your parents' arrangement to occupy the position of princess consort. Brother Huai said you sheltered women can't even climb onto a horse's back. Can't climb onto a horse's back. I seem to have heard the joke of the century and couldn't help laughing so hard I doubled over. When I severed the northern Dai chieftain's hamstring on horseback in the northern desert, she probably didn't even know how to ride yet. I grabbed the red-tasseled spear beside me with a backhand motion, pointing the spear tip directly at Su Miamian's brow. The delicate young lady staggered backward, her watery eyes seeming ready to burst into tears again. I performed a set of my most practiced spear techniques, the spear wind sweeping away all the pearl ornaments from her hair. Watch closely. I used the final thrust to lift up her fallen begonia hairpin, then split it in half with the spear tip. Under her terrified gaze, I grinned at her. Daughters of the northern desert can kill enemies on horseback, and dismounted, we also slay demons and monsters. She collapsed into the scattered pile of pearls, her body swaying precariously, trembling like a sieve. A familiar figure suddenly stumbled through the doorway. Chu Huai, eyes blazing with fury, held the trembling person on the ground and cursed at me. Shu Feiwan, have you lost your mind, daring to treat Miamian like this? Don't think that just because General Shui has your back, you can run wild in the prince's manor. Let me tell you, your father is already past his prime, and the emperor has issued a decree that Prince Huai will soon be sent to the northern desert to take over military command. From now on, you'll have no backing from the northern desert. If you continue to be so arrogant and domineering, I will truly divorce you. My eyes sharpened, my gaze piercing toward Chu Huai like a torch. In my book, there is only mutual divorce and widowhood. This statement was her counterattack against betrayal, and also a declaration to herself. I, Shui Feiwan, have never been anyone's accessory. If you are heartless, I will be unrighteous. When it comes to my bottom line, I will never back down. In all these years since returning to the capital, I've retracted my claws and tried hard to be a calm and composed noblewoman. It made people forget that I was never a delicate boudoir lady. But Chu Huai had seen me at my most bloodthirsty, so he still held some fear of me. He didn't mention divorcing his wife again, only hurriedly left my courtyard holding his beloved Su Miamian. Watching their departing figures, I swallowed the bitterness in my heart and slowly curved my lips into a smile. The matter of mutual divorce should indeed be put on the agenda. After that day, Chu Huai and Su Miamian became even more inseparable. In the prince's manor, she had already clearly taken it upon herself to act as the lady of the house. She saw me as a thorn in her side, yet still feared my red-tasseled spear, so she didn't dare actually do anything to me. But she often spouted shocking words, calling everyone around her ancient people, while claiming she herself came from a distant and advanced future. I thought her mind wasn't quite right, but Chu Huai really fell for her act, indulging her to the point of lawlessness, flipping through the secret reports presented by the hidden guards. I fell into deep thought. During this time, Su Miamian had caused quite a few disasters. She claimed to come from a world 1,000 years in the future, able to create iron horses that travel 1,000 miles a day, knowing secret arts to transmit messages across mountains and seas, and had even casually recited lines like, "If life were only as when we first met at poetry gatherings," winning extreme adoration from literary scholars and talented men. Not only that, she also insisted on implementing some scientific breeding method, mixing senna leaves into the fodder at the western suburbs' horse grounds, causing the war horses of the 5 military camps to have diarrhea all day. When the veterinarian scolded her for acting recklessly, she put on a stern face and raised her voice even louder. Ancient people are just ignorant. This is probiotic fermented feed. Once the horses get used to it, their constitution will be better in the future. Furthermore, she claimed to manufacture some bicycle and melted down the arrowheads from the city defense camp to refine glass. She sent quite a few people to search for the so-called silica sand raw material, but because the places she went to were mostly savage lands fraught with danger, almost no one returned alive. In the end, her so-called glass came to nothing. My hand clutching the secret report grew tighter and tighter. I grabbed the newly hung golden silk birdcage and headed straight to Sumiamian's courtyard. Before even entering the courtyard, I could hear laughter like silver bells from afar, sounding extremely joyful. The guards at the gate looked at me, wanting to speak but hesitating. I glared at them, and they dared not say another word. Walking in leisurely, I saw Sumiamian softly leaning in Chuhuai's embrace, feeding him grapes one by one. That extravagant scene was physically and mentally uncomfortable to watch. I slammed the birdcage in my hand down at their feet with a bang, causing Sumiamian to let out a shriek. Shui Feiwan, what madness is this? Brother Huai is here. It is fine if you hurt me, but if you hurt him, what crime would that be? Chu Huai tightened his hold on the person in his arms, looking at me as if looking at a monster. I raised an eyebrow, pointed at the broken birdcage, and said indifferently, Miss Sue's probiotics killed this princess's favorite canary yesterday. I heard even the warhorses at the western suburbs stable weren't spared. My lord, since you trust Miss Sue so much, why don't you try this miraculous, immortal medicine she concocted? Chu Huai looked at the medicine packet in my hand and instinctively took half a step back. Sumiamian suddenly raised her head, her eyes seemingly laced with poison. You feudal women are just so short-sighted. They're just a few dead animals. That is the necessary price of the Industrial Revolution. What do you know? I snorted coldly and threw another ledger before their eyes. Then this contraption of a Ferris wheel, was it also built for the future of our dynasty? Chu Huai clenched the ledger tightly, veins bulging on the back of his hand, pointing at me with furious eyes. Everything in Prince Chi's manor belongs to this king. Whatever this king does, is it your place to question? I didn't retreat but advanced, pressing forward step by step. Then does your highness know that the silver spent on this so-called Ferris wheel you built to win a beauty's smile is equivalent to 3 years of military provisions for Mobai? The long cry of a gerfalcon came from outside the window. The deputy general of the city defense battalion suddenly rushed in, hesitant to speak, your highness. The composite bow that Miss Sue improved cannot be used for long. The eyes of 30 sons from the Divine Arrow Battalion were blinded by the bow's recoil. I closed my eyes, my red-tasseled spear pointing directly at Sumiamian's eyes, scaring her into falling to the ground. Sumiamian, speak! Are you a Northern Dai spy trying to harm our great Zhao like this? Sumiamian defended herself with a sobbing voice. I didn't. Everything I did was for Brother Huai. It must be you, Shui Feiwan. You must have used some scheme to frame me. While crying out, she fumbled for something in her sleeve. Then a large handful of spicy powder came splashing down over my head. I spun around to dodge it. In just a few breaths, the tip of my red-tasseled spear was already pointing at Sumiamian's throat, drawing a tiny drop of blood. I stared at her with an ambiguous smile, my voice colder than the wind and snow of the northern desert. Miss Sue, did the people of your era ever teach you that, in the face of absolute martial power, all opportunistic tricks are a joke? Chu Huai, who had long been dumbstruck on the side, saw that I had actually wounded his precious darling, and in great alarm pulled her back into his arms, roaring hatefully, Shu Feiwan, you defy your husband, have a vicious heart, and lack any tolerance for others. I am going to divorce. I glanced at him with my eyes, and he suddenly changed his words. I want to mutually separate from you. This time I didn't refuse, and directly pulled Chu Huai into the study. The moment I obtained the separation document, these 3 years turned into passing clouds, slowly fading in my mind. I packed my belongings in high spirits, preparing to return to the northern desert immediately. The eagle trapped in a golden cage for 3 years could finally soar freely again. The day I departed from Prince Chi's manor, Chu Huai unexpectedly came to the entrance to see me off. He clenched his fists at his sides, his tone still lofty and superior. A woman who has been divorced is not tolerated by worldly customs. From now on, you'll never find a husband like me again. I'll give you one last chance. Apologize to Miamian, and I can tear up the divorce papers, pretending this never happened. You will still be the high and mighty Princess Chi, enjoying a lifetime of glory and wealth. I looked at Chu Huai's face and couldn't help but laugh out loud. This face, once clear in my eyes, now seems covered with a layer of fog. I can no longer see it clearly. Sitting on horseback, I turned my head back, and facing the flying strands of hair, I felt incredibly liberated. No need, Your Highness Prince Chi, from now on. We'll be separated by mountains and rivers. No need to meet again. I also wish you and Miss Sue will become a couple and live happily together for 100 years. The horse's hooves struck down, dust flying up. I listened to Chu Huai behind me choking and coughing endlessly from the kicked-up dust, and never looked back again. On the third day, entering the Mobe Post Road, I was preparing to scoop water from the river to quench my thirst. A magnolia flower suddenly shot down from above, piercing into the mud beside my hand, knocking away the water jug I was filling. Toe strike a flower branch with the force of an arrow. This person is not to be underestimated. I raised my eyes to look around when a laughing reminder came from the top of the cliff. General Shui, 3 miles upstream, there are poisoned horse corpses from a merchant caravan that died suddenly. Drinking this water will likely bring disaster. I looked up alertly and saw a brocade-robed man sitting with his legs propped up on a 100-year-old poplar tree. His black cloak was covered in wind-blown sand, and in his hand he was pinching a magnolia flower that seemed out of place. Those chiseled features were both strange and familiar. A flash of inspiration struck my mind, and I suddenly remembered who he was. Is Prince Y here, waiting by the tree for prey? I flicked up a piece of rubble with my spear tip and struck mercilessly toward the treetop. He nimbly flipped over, and with a few leaps arrived at my side. As he landed, he deliberately staggered half a step and crashed into my embrace, bringing with him the full scent of magnolia. Not so. I am waiting for a lost eagle. Warm breath brushed past my ear as that low, husky voice rang in my ears like a cat's scratching. The general's saddle has made this prince's waist ache. How about sharing this prince's carriage instead? I reached back intending to push him into the water, but he was like a slippery loach slipping out of my hands in 2 or 3 moves, still grinning cheekily with that frivolous look all over his face. I shook my head and prepared to mount my horse. Shouldn't Your Highness respectfully address me as third sister-in-law? He pursed his lips, very dissatisfied. The general has already divorced third imperial brother, so what kind of third sister-in-law would I be calling you? Besides, in the future, who knows what I'll end up calling you? I ignored his muttering and turned my horse around, preparing to leave. But suddenly an oil paper package appeared before my eyes, emanating a familiar milky fragrance. This scent seemed to be a specialty from the northern desert camel milk cake. 5 years ago, when the general saved me at Snowwolf Slope, it was this that pulled me back from the King of Hell's palace. The man before me was tall and slender, his wet eyelashes concealing a burning light. It is just that cake, not personally fed by the general, tastes much worse. I pinched up half a piece of cake, squinting my eyes with a cold smile. Your Highness didn't have such a glib tongue back when you were pretending to be a mute orphan. I finished the milk cake and was about to brush off the crumbs from my hands when he grabbed my wrist. With a flick of his tongue, the remaining crumbs between my fingers were all taken into his mouth. Now that I have a tongue, naturally, I must taste some other things. I stared blankly at his wriggling lips, my old face flushing red for no reason. My thoughts were then pulled back to 5 years ago. Prince Huai was named Chu Chengfang, the emperor's least favored son. His mother consort was a princess of a fallen kingdom, and she had not lived pleasantly in the imperial palace since childhood. When he was 15, to prove his own worth, he proposed to the emperor to train at the border. The young man had backbone. He came to the northern desert alone, did not reveal his royal identity, and simply joined the camp as an obscure new recruit. He was very bold and unafraid of death. During a surprise attack, he got trapped at Snowwolf Slope and was later rescued by me. At that time, his whole body was frozen stiff, buried in the ice and snow for a full 3 days. He was the only survivor of that battle. After being rescued, because his throat was frostbitten, he was unable to speak for a time. I thought he was born deaf and mute, and out of compassion, I took good care of him for a while. From then on, I kept him under my command for a full 2 years. I watched him grow from a common soldier into a deputy general capable of handling things on his own. It wasn't until Chu Huai came to propose marriage that his identity came to light. But on the night before my wedding to Chu Huai, he requested to go to his fief on his own, not even staying to drink a single cup of celebratory wine. I was also disappointed back then. After all, we had lived and died together for 2 years, yet he just left without a word like that. It was truly chilling. Over these years, I haven't heard any news about him. I just don't know why he somehow managed to get assigned such a task, to go to the northern desert to recover the military authority of the Shui family army. A strange feeling arose in my heart, and I unconsciously opened my mouth to ask, "On the day of my wedding, why didn't you say?" Before I could finish speaking, I suddenly heard him shout fiercely, "Watch out!" Immediately, I was yanked off my horse by him, rolling on the ground with him several times. Because it happened so suddenly, I had no time to react at all. But with a cushion of flesh beneath me, I wasn't hurt in the slightest. I had just lifted myself up when a large hand grabbed the back of my head, pressing me down firmly. The scent of magnolia rushed toward me, my nose nearly colliding with the moist, thin lips before my eyes. Dozens of black horses suddenly charged out from the canyon. I shoved away the man beneath me, got up and drew my red-tasseled spear to prepare for the enemy. Chu Chengfeng actually seized my spear first, positioning himself in front of me. I still remember the bloody battle of the 8 wastelands technique the general taught me. He executed a beautiful display of spear flourishes, his exposed back pressed against my chest. The general hadn't finished teaching me back then, so this student had no choice but to improvise. This ambushing force was composed of elite Northerny soldiers. I wondered if they had learned of my return to the northern desert and specifically came here to assassinate me. With Chu Chengfeng having seized my weapon and shielding me behind him, I didn't know what to do for a moment. The personal guards he brought were invincible in battle. My men didn't even get a chance to engage. The northern die's curved blades were shattered inch by the wind from his spear, the air filling with a mixture of magnolia and the stench of blood. My heart tensed. When had that stubborn boy who used to follow behind me become so formidable? This was no obscure, marginalized prince. He was clearly the most ferocious wolf on the grasslands. Dealing with this wave of Northern soldiers took only a few hours. The Northern forces were completely annihilated, while our side only sustained minor injuries. It was too late to continue traveling, so we found a ruined temple to spend the night. The moon hung high, its radiant light washing over everything. I was wiping my spearhead by the campfire when I suddenly heard rustling sounds behind me. I turned my head in surprise. I saw that Chu Changfang had already half removed his clothes, revealing his muscular upper body. Around his firm waist and abdomen, a vicious bloody wound was strikingly visible. My eyes showed astonishment. At this moment, I couldn't care about the distinction between men and women. So I took out wound medicine, preparing to bandage him. "How did you get injured?" From earlier until now, I hadn't heard him make a sound. Therefore, from beginning to end, I had never noticed the fact that he was injured. He wore a dark-colored robe, and around his waist and abdomen there was a faint dark stain seeping through, which was indeed very hard to detect. But at this moment, he didn't have any of the fortitude of someone who could endure pain for so long. Instead, he looked like a real pampered young master, staring at me with watery eyes full of grievance. The moment my hand with the medicinal powder touched his wound, he started hissing and rolling his eyes back. My hand applying the medicine became even more careful, after finally sprinkling the wound powder over all the injuries. When I looked up, I discovered that Chu Chengfeng had leaned his head close, at a distance of no more than a few inches from me. Our breaths mingled, our noses nearly touching each other. The fragrance of magnolia flowers gradually intensified, enveloping me completely. Before I could speak, those eyes before me that seemed to reflect the stars curved into crescents. Why is the general's face red? I froze, then flew into an embarrassed rage. I stretched out a finger and jabbed hard at his wound. A piercing scream echoed through the ruined temple, startling a large flock of crows. "General, I was wrong, don't be angry." After wailing, he clutched his wound and sidled up to me again, his gaze seemingly carrying a hint of amusement. Does the general still remember? Back then my back was also covered with countless gashes, particularly unsightly. You said the scars of Mobe's sons are the merits of guarding the frontier. He suddenly extended his index finger, his calloused fingertip hovering over the old wound at my collarbone. Does this medal the general earned saving me still hurt now? I brushed away his overstepping hand, but he swept that magnolia flower across my earlobe. His suddenly serious tone carried a hint of bewitchment. If the general wants this Mobe to never be shackled by imperial power, this king can help you. Outside the temple, a sea eagle's long cry suddenly rang out, breaking the silent night. I stood up to meet his piercing gaze and said indifferently, "Prince Huai, your highness, your wolfish ambitions are about to slip out from under that fox fur." He chuckled softly as he pinned that magnolia to my red-tasseled spear, the broken statue casting a shadow in his eyes. Then the general must grip this red-tasseled spear tightly after all. What this king schemes for is not just the kingdom. The night wind swept away the unfinished words, and my heart suddenly began to pound wildly. The rest of the journey went incredibly smoothly. Chu Chengfeng followed behind me in his carriage, neither too close nor too far, claiming it was on his way. His personal guards were all formidable, which saved me quite a bit of trouble. If only he didn't whine and wheedle me into changing his bandages every now and then, it would have been a very pleasant journey. When the wind and sand of the northern desert hit my face, I saw my father, whom I'd been longing for day and night. This fierce general who once single-handedly lifted the northern Deccan was now gripping the watchtower railing, his eyes seemingly glistening with tears. "Wanna, you've suffered." His rusty throat rolled, and his gaze suddenly fixed on something behind me. Chu Chengfeng was bending down to unfasten the black iron buckle on the side of my saddle, his fingertips seemingly brushing across my wrist unintentionally. After 3 years of idle living in the capital, my skin had indeed become much more delicate. He nodded to my father, his palm resting against the small of my back as if by accident. "General Shui, all is well. This junior has escorted Awen home." He clutched his sore spot and groaned for quite a while. Father put on a polite smile, his hawk-like eyes sweeping over the sword at his waist. "Your Highness, this sword of yours, the material looks somewhat familiar." Chu Chengfeng froze for a moment, then revealed a calm smile. "Marshal Shui has a keen eye. I trained under a Wan for 2 years. During that time, with every battle, the Shui family army suffered countless casualties. For every comrade who didn't return, I gathered their arrowheads. As they accumulated, I had to find them a proper home." I looked up in surprise, gazing at the longsword that never left his side. So the material was actually the same as my red-tasseled spear. Father's pupils constricted sharply, and his expression softened. "This old minister will host a welcoming banquet for your highness today." The bonfire feast in Mobe was exceptionally lively. The whole roasted lamb sizzled with oil. Young men and women sang and danced around the flames, so passionate yet peaceful. A figure suddenly sat down beside me. A plate of lamb meat, carefully sliced with a dagger, was placed before my eyes. I remember the general prefers 20% fat, 80% lean. The skin on this meat is roasted crispy, and I sprinkled honey on it. It is the flavor you like. I accepted it without hesitation and took a small bite. Sure enough, it was juicy and bursting with savory aroma. I am touched you still remember my preferences. Chu Chengfeng's eyes sparkled even more brilliantly in the firelight. Actually, what I remember is much, much more. I avoided his burning gaze, but my wrist was grabbed and dragged toward the bonfire, merging into the fervent singing and dancing. A bare-chested, sturdy man circled to my side and boldly professed his love. "Marshal Shui, now that the young general has returned, our Wusun tribe offers 300 white camels as betrothal gifts to marry the young general." Bullshit. We Huyan men can tear wolves apart barehanded. Young General Shui is a phoenix among people and should naturally be matched with me. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. The Mobe people are known for their fierce customs, but I truly hadn't expected to be this popular. Just catching a glimpse of Chu Chengfeng from the corner of my eye, his knuckles gripping the wine cup had turned white, and his expression didn't look too good. Looking more carefully, the moon white brocade robe he had specially changed into today made him look like a crane that had wandered into a pack of wolves among all the bare-chested men. Father glanced at him sideways, his smile chilly. Since Wana has returned to Mobe, she indeed should find someone stronger and more reliable. Compared to certain lotus root spirits reincarnated from the capital, our Mobe men are far more dependable. As soon as he said this, Chu Chengfeng suddenly shot up as if his ass had been set on fire. He strode over to my side, grabbed my hand and dragged me away from those covetous men as if fleeing from the plague. Perhaps too anxious, he nearly bit his tongue while speaking. General Shui, not everyone in the capital is ungrateful. I've admired Feifei for many years, and wished to offer all of Mobe as betrothal gifts to marry her as my wife. I hope you'll grant us your blessing. My mind went buzz, and for a moment I couldn't wrap my head around it, but Chu Changfeng pulled me into Father's tent. Before Father could speak, he first pulled out a small medicine packet from his robe and respectfully bowed. Junior's true purpose in coming to Mobe this time was actually under His Majesty's orders to poison General Shui to death. Under our shocked gazes, he calmly continued, His Majesty fears the Shui family army only recognizes the Shui family and not the imperial family. So he wanted to secretly kill General Shui that way. With Mobe left leaderless, military power could truly fall into the imperial clan's hands. Father lifted his eyelids and sincerely asked, Prince Hui is His Majesty's own younger brother. Why would you help this old minister? Does your highness perhaps also wish to compete for control of this realm? This old minister does not fear death. If my old life can end His Majesty's suspicions and preserve the peace of Mobe's people, it wouldn't be unacceptable. I suddenly turned my head, my eyes already brimming with tears, Father. But someone gently squeezed my palm. Chu Chengfeng bowed again, his tone resolute. This junior does not act for the world, but only for Fei Fane 3 years ago. I was a step too slow and missed her, nearly regretting it for life. Now that I've finally found her, I only wish to protect her and what she cherishes. Father stroked the beard on his chin, his expression softening. Then how does your highness plan to protect her? We settled down in Mobe. Chu Chengfeng set about reclaiming military authority. During this time, I even received several letters from Chu Hui. Every single one urged me to turn back, claiming that as long as I was willing to coexist peacefully with Sumiamian, he could forgive me and reconcile with me. I tossed them into the brazier after reading, and paid them no more mind. Chu Chengfeng, however, wrote something behind my back, carefully keeping it from my sight. I couldn't be bothered with him, so I let him be. A month later, news came from Mobe that old General Shui had passed away from illness. Dressed in plain mourning clothes, I escorted the coffin back to the capital. Chu Chengfeng smoothly took over the Shui family army, remaining in Mobe to handle subsequent matters. On both sides of the vast Gobi, crowds of common people stood to see him off. Father spent half his life in military service, guarding Mobe, striking such fear into the Barong that they dared not act rashly. Only then could the people of Mo City live and work in peace, recuperating and rebuilding. They knelt on the ground of their own accord, some already sobbing uncontrollably. With the old general gone, would this newly arrived commanding general care for the people as he had? My heart was filled with mixed emotions. What right do those in power have to reign for eternity when they harm loyal subjects out of suspicion and abandon the common people? Returning to the general's manor in the capital was somewhat unexpected. After my mother passed, my father never remarried and lived with me in the northern desert all along. This vast general's manor only had a few servants maintaining it year-round, so it should have been desolate. But upon this return, the mourning hall was already properly arranged, and Chu Hui stood to the side with a haggard face. Seeing my return, his eyes lit up as he came forward to greet me. Ah, Wan, now that old General Shui has passed, you have no one to rely on. Come back to my side and let me take care of you for the rest of your life. I glanced at him, my gaze cold. You knew everything all along, yet didn't tell me the truth. Pain flashed across his face as he clenched his fists at his sides. The Shui family tree has grown too large, already taking nutrients from the imperial clan. The emperor could no longer tolerate it. I was the one who persuaded him to spare you, exchanging only old General Shue's life for the safety of everyone else. Awan, I did my best. Furious, I slapped him so hard his head turned to the side. Chu Huai, despite 3 years of marriage, you truly disgust me. He covered his face, his tone becoming urgent. So you are going to throw yourself into Chu Changfeng's arms. He is nothing but the emperor's dog and absolutely cannot protect you. He wanted to say more, but a eunuch announced that the emperor, mindful of the general's lifetime service to the country, had personally left the palace to come and pay his respects. In the hall, the emperor's face was full of grief, but when he saw my father's corpse, he clearly breathed a sigh of relief. I knew he hadn't truly come to mourn. He merely wanted to confirm that father had indeed died as he wished. I lowered my eyes, hatred surging in my heart. Yet I still kowtowed to him gratefully. Thank you for your majesty's concern. Father's spirit in heaven will surely remember your grace. Chu Huai accompanied the emperor back to the palace, acting every bit like the master of the house. As he passed by me, he turned back to look at me again. Awan, besides me, you have no better choice. Not long after they left, another uninvited guest arrived. Sumiamian wore a pink dress, charming and lovely. After wandering around the morning hall with her hands behind her back for a few circles, she suddenly burst out laughing with a poochie. I wondered how capable sister was, to so proudly divorce and return to Mobe, only to jinx your own father to death so quickly. After saying this, she patted her chest as if frightened. Fortunately, Brother Huai is reasonable and divorced you in time for my sake. Otherwise, who knows? You might have brought bad luck to him too. TSK. So what if you know some martial arts? You feudal women, without the protection of a husband or father, are just lambs to the slaughter. In the future, you'd better not end up in a brothel. If those filthy men touch you, it would disgrace our Prince Chi's manor. I didn't want to deal with her, and continued throwing paper money into the fire basin on my own. Seeing I had no reaction, she felt she'd lost face and kicked the fire basin over. The unburned paper money fluttered and scattered everywhere, with several pieces leisurely landing on her body, igniting into little flames. Awan Chu Huai, who had left, returned from outside the door. Sumiamian's eyes darted around, and suddenly she slapped her hand fiercely onto the flames, whimpering as she fell into the newcomer's arms, tears streaming down her face like pear blossoms in rain, sobbing incoherently. Brother Huai, save me. While speaking, she held up her reddened fingers that had been burned, waving them pitifully before Chu Huai's eyes. Brother Huai, don't blame sister either. She just lost her only family member. She must be feeling terrible inside too. That is why she kicked the fire basin at me to vent. I don't hurt, don't be angry with her. I frowned and sneered. Sumiamian, your act is unworthy of the era you are so proud of. If you two want to act crazy, go back to Prince Chi's manor. Don't be an eyesore here. For some reason this time Chu Huai actually pried away her hands that were wrapped around his waist. Instead, he moved closer to me and even tried to check my hand. Awan, are you all right? Are you hurt? I was slightly surprised, unable to figure out what act he was putting on now. Perhaps my coldness had hurt him. He pretended to cough and bent down to help me straighten the brazier. When he looked up, his eyes seemed to be filled with infinite affection. Awan, think carefully about what I just said. You are now alone and helpless, and you've lost your military authority. It is hard for you to survive in this capital city alone. Why not destroy that divorce letter and come back to me? The position of Princess Chi, I've always kept it for you. As soon as he finished speaking, Sumiamian shrieked and came over to tear at Chu Huai's lapels. Brother Huai, what are you saying? You've been thinking about this bitch all along. No wonder every time I brought up making me your legitimate wife, you always change the subject. I've sacrificed so much for you. Why are you treating me like this? Chu Huai seemed extremely annoyed and flung his sleeve to shake off Sumiamian's grasping hand. You still dare to speak? Haven't you caused me enough trouble? Now everyone in court is impeaching me and mocking me, making it impossible for me to show my face. If I hadn't mistakenly trusted you, how would I have ended up like this? You still want to be the princess consort. When Awan was here, Everything in the residence was managed perfectly, and everyone would think more highly of me because of her. But what about you? Not only did you force me to divorce her, all you do every day is be jealous and stir up trouble. Those so-called advanced technologies of yours, which one of them hasn't been a waste of people's labor and money, ultimately useless. How can you compare to a Wan? You are not even worth a single finger of hers. Having said this much, he simply gave up all pretense, ignoring Sumiamian's shocked expression, and directly grabbed my hand, holding it tightly in his palm. Awan, I know I wronged you before, blinded by a momentary sense of novelty. But now I finally understand that only you truly care about me, and only you are worthy of being my princess consort. I'll send Sumiamian away, and we'll start over. I promise I'll be devoted to you alone and never let you suffer even the slightest harm. Before the word harm could leave his mouth, a gleaming sword swept past Chuhuai's ear. He was so frightened he collapsed to the ground, his hand that had been holding mine already released, hanging at his side and trembling secretly. A figure in dark robes walked in from outside the door, hands clasped behind his back, calm and composed. Third Imperial Brother's words sound better than songs, but when real danger comes, aren't you still the first to abandon a Wan? The newcomer was naturally the returned Chu Chengfeng. I glanced at him and asked meaningfully, "Is everything arranged?" He wore a stern expression, looking rather unhappy. Walking to my side, he took my hand and gently rubbed it in his palm. "How could you be so careless and let dirty things touch you? Let me wipe it for you." Chu Huai on the ground widened his eyes, as if only now realizing what had happened, got up and pointed at Chu Chengfeng, cursing loudly. "What are you doing? She is your sister-in-law. Let go of her now." Chu Chengfeng glanced at him sideways, reached out to wrap his arm around my waist, and even tightened it. "Didn't you two already divorce? My current sister-in-law should be that otherworldly genius Misu, right? I've already gotten engaged to a Wan in Mo Bay. She is now my fiancée." Chu Huai suddenly went mad. But now he had neither standing nor martial strength, and in the end actually dropped to his knees before me with a thud, crying tearfully. "Awan, I know I was wrong. I can't live without you. Please don't marry him." "Okay. Have you forgotten how happy we used to be? I am begging you to give me one more chance. I promise I'll never betray you again." At this moment, tears and snot covered his face, making him look quite pathetic. 3 years as husband and wife, treating each other with respect, we indeed once had a sweet period. But betrayal is betrayal. It is a scar on the heart that can never be erased. Impossible to forgive in this lifetime. Summonon pinched my waist with moderate force, making me gasp. Turning my head to look at the man beside me, I saw a sulky face all puffed up, just like a dog whose bone had been stolen. I held back my laughter, turned around and didn't spare another glance at the person on the ground. "Prince Chi, please leave. Shui Fei Wan doesn't eat grass from behind her." Dragged and half carried back to the room by a certain someone, I was pressed directly against the back of the door. Chu Chengfeng was tall, a full head and a half taller than me. Plus, with a body trained in martial arts for years, his muscles were firm, giving off a strong sense of oppression. I tilted my head slightly, feeling somewhat awkward, so I changed the subject. What exactly did Su Miamian do? How come after just a few months of not seeing her, Chu Huai detests her this much?" Chu Chengfeng let out a snort from his nose, but began to clear up my confusion. Not a single thing she did was reliables. She said she wanted to build some hydroelectric station, forcibly conscripted quite a lot of labor. The result was a flood that destroyed the dam, causing countless deaths and injuries. She also said she had a secret formula to improve gunpowder, but probably got the ratio wrong and directly blew up the entire East Street. She convinced Third Imperial Brother to give children some kind of smallpox inoculation technique, causing the deaths of countless children. Latter, these victimized common people all beat the Denwen drum to sue Prince Chifei for treating human lives as worthless. Third Imperial Brother was forced to write an edict of self-reproach and nearly depleted his entire family fortune before he could pacify the people's hearts. I couldn't help but frown as I listened. Chu Huai's poor judgment of character had actually harmed so many common people. He truly deserved his punishment. This is what comes from suffering so much. No wonder he wants to turn back and look for me again. But where in the world is there such a cheap deal? My chin was gently turned straight, a slightly cool finger rubbing against my lips. What is a won thinking about? I've already taken care of everything. Can I collect some interest? I press my hand against his approaching lips. My cheeks slightly flushed. I have been married before. He pried open my hand, the magnolia fragrance rushing straight at my face. I just like former sister-in-laws, more familiar. I rolled my eyes at him, then said, I am 2 years older than you. His nose touched mine, a deep laugh overflowing from his throat. I just like those older than me. They know how to care for people. But the unfinished words were swallowed into his mouth. The moonlight outside the window was just right. The next day at court, the emperor tearfully commemorated General Shui's lifetime of service to the country in the Great Hall, working himself to death. Amid the room full of mourning voices, I instead curled up the corners of my mouth and smiled lightly. This laughter, mixed in with everyone's lukewarm grief, was especially jarring. The people present couldn't help but straighten up, staring at me in a daze. Only the emperor squinted his eyes as if facing a great enemy. I simply stopped pretending, raised my head, and openly looked straight into those murky eyes. This humble subject is laughing because my father devoted his entire life to military service and was utterly loyal to your majesty. Why would your majesty, swayed by those treacherous slanderers and baseless suspicions, poison my father to death? And now you still put on such a grief-stricken act. It truly chills the hearts of all the soldiers under heaven. The emperor flew into a rage, grabbed the inkstone from the table and hurled it at me, his face flushed red with exasperation. How dare you? Who gave you the audacity to slander me like this? Guards, throw her into the imperial prison at once and execute her on a chosen day. Chu Huai at my side was both shocked and furious, and actually knelt down beside me. I beg your majesty's pardon. Awan has lost her loved one and her mind is confused. Please, in consideration of old General Shui's lifetime of service to the nation, spare her life. The emperor slammed the table, frustrated and disappointed. You still dare to plead for her? Your taste in women is absolutely terrible. Every single one has caused me enormous trouble. If you continue to speak for her, you'll be executed alongside her. Chu Huai's body trembled. Finally, he glanced at me once and silently retreated to the back. 2 armored guards received the order and strode toward me menacingly. But before they could get close to me, a long sword pinned them to the 9-dragon pillar in the hall, making them howl in pain. Chu Chengfang stepped out from the shadows. His aura so imposing it sent chills down one's spine. Imperial brother, you wrote me a letter a few months ago, asking me to find an opportunity to poison old General Shui to death, so as to smoothly reclaim the military power of the northern desert. Have you forgotten about that? He pulled out a letter from his sleeve, unfolded it and waved it around. The imperial seal was prominently stamped at the bottom of the letter. There was simply no room for argument. The hall below erupted in uproar. The emperor slammed the table in exasperation, his finger pointing at Chu Chengfeng and trembling. You are planning a rebellion. Someone come quickly and seize these 2 traitorous subjects at once. As soon as his words fell, orderly footsteps came from outside the hall. One could tell they were well trained, their presence imposing and grand. Only then did the emperor's expression ease, and he slowly sat back down on the dragon throne. As if feeling victory was in his grasp, his fingers rhythmically tapped on the armrest. Shu, he commanded troops in the northern desert, and grew powerful on his own, harboring wolfish ambitions. I granted him death out of consideration for his past merits. You all could have survived, yet you insist on courting death. Your Majesty's words are mistaken. This old subject has been utterly loyal with a devoted heart, guarding the northern desert for decades. Yet in the end, your Majesty places such a label on me, it truly chills my heart. As this resonant voice rang out, the entire hall fell silent. The emperor lost his balance for a moment and nearly fell off the dragon throne. His eyes glanced toward the figure behind father, his face turning deathly pale inch by inch. What surrounded the imperial palace was clearly the Shui family army that should have been far away in the northern desert, with not a single shadow of the imperial guards. I clapped the dust off my hands, my voice resounding firmly. distinguished lords. His Majesty only favors treacherous sycophants and persecutes the loyal and virtuous. Today it is my Shui family that suffers disaster. But tomorrow could it not be your Zhao family, Jiang family, or Sunday family? To serve such a person devoid of virtue and talent for a lifetime, only to end up not knowing when you'll be separated from your head, are you willing to accept this? These words stirred up 1,000 waves with one stone. Some loyal ministers inevitably felt the sorrow of the fox mourning. The rabbit is death. Chu Changfeng and I exchanged a smile, knowing the overall situation was already decided. Only Chu Huai stumbled out, looking at me with tears about to fall again. Awan, how can you become this traitor who steals the nation? Quickly have the Shui family army retreat back to the northern desert, and I will definitely plead with Imperial Brother properly. As long as you obediently atone for your crimes through meritorious service, I swear I will only be with you. One life, one world, one pair of people. I rolled my eyes and couldn't help but look at Chu Changfeng. Do all you Chu family people have such unclear minds? Chu Changfeng closed his eyes. I am different. I have foreign blood in my veins. Chu Changfeng and I, under the name of purging the emperor's side, forced the emperor to personally write an edict of self-reproach and abdicate in favor of the worthy. Chu Huai, as the emperor's blood brother, was thrown into the imperial clan court together with him. Going in together was also Su Miamian. It is said that on the day she was imprisoned, she seemed possessed by madness, both crying and laughing. How could this be? I clearly mastered the Transmigrator's essential manual. So how am I still achieving nothing and ending up in such a state? I suppressed the urge to slap her across the face and cursed inwardly. Su Miamian might truly be from the future, but I've also read that manual of hers. Every manufacturing method in it requires special materials. Those materials, at least for now, no one knows how to obtain. Her ending up like this is still letting her off easy. Among the remaining members of the imperial bloodline, Prince Huai Chu Chengfeng has the highest support. More than half of the ministers have nominated him to be emperor. This prince, who was not favored in the past, actually has a meticulous mind and possesses both virtue and talent. Over the past 5 years, though, he was far away in his fief. Half of the court officials have actually submitted to him. He can truly turn his hand to make clouds and overturn it to make rain. The court situation is almost entirely under his control. His ascension to the throne is practically a done deal. I cannot leave Mobe for long. After everything has settled, I also followed the Shui family army, planning to return to Mobe together. But just as we left the city, a dark-robed figure blocked the front of the procession. Looking at his appearance, even his crown is somewhat askew, seeming quite flustered and exasperated. Father glanced back at me, then led the Shui family army to depart first, leaving just the two of us in place, eyes meeting. He spurred his horse forward, looking at my calm and composed manner with gritted teeth. I never imagined that General Shui would be someone who breaks their word and kicks down the ladder after crossing the river. I shrugged, looking completely innocent. Your Highness has it all wrong. My father and I cleared the obstacles for your Highness, and we will continue to guard the borders in Mobe on your Highness's behalf. Having no worries at the frontier is the most sincere gift I can offer your Highness. How is this kicking down the ladder? He was furious, saying word by word, You promised to marry me as my wife. I sighed, completely sincere. Prince Huai. No, perhaps I should call you the future emperor of Great Zhao. Shui Feiwan has already suffered once from marriage, imprisoned in a gilded cage for 3 whole years. Even a mere idle prince could hurt me like that. If I were to marry you and spend every day competing for favor with 3,000 beauties in the harem, wouldn't that be locking myself into yet another, even larger gilded cage, please? Your Highness, spare us both. Things as they are now, this is the best outcome for you and me. He smiled bitterly, then suddenly leapt up and sat down behind me. Me waist was held tight by him, his hot breath brushing against my ear. You heartless thing, who said I am going to be emperor. I was shocked and turned to look at him, only to be pecked lightly by him like a dragonfly touching water. Mobe should still be lacking a prince of Jembe. Right, now let's see what other excuse you have to refuse me. I turned back woodenly, muttering to myself, but you, What, you what? Silly one. I've said it from the very beginning. From start to finish, all I want is you. He squeezed the horse's flanks, and the horse let out a long neigh and galloped wildly. The wind blew our long hair, flapping loudly. I heard his voice, filled with laughter, echoing in my ears. Shifaiwan, listen well. The sandstorms of the northern desert will cease. The strong liquor will run dry, but you, standing by my side, can forever be the freest eagle.